Alright, so I'm trying to edit all these GDC videos, but I swear to God, nobody will shut up about this difficulty in games thing or in Sekiro. So for good or ill, I'm gonna throw my hat in the ring. Okay, so right now there's this big sort of conversation happening in the gaming discourse about whether or not Sekiro is too difficult, the importance of creative vision, accessibility, and games journalists having to get good at playing video games. Haven't heard that one in a while. So I wanted to try and explain it in a way that makes sense to humans, because it seems like it's actually like maybe at least three separate conversations. Over here we have people saying, creative intent is really important and we should let authors, make the games they want to. Right over here, get it, totally. Over here then we have people talking about accessibility in games, which has often been an area of games that has been ignored by both players, the press, kind of everyone, right? Saying like, it's really important that games should be made in a way that people can tinker with the settings and whatnot, and people with different abilities will be able to play these games and enjoy them. Got it? Right. And in the middle, we have this sort of more amorphous conversation where people are like, yeah, I like these Soulsborne games. Fuck me, this one's real hard. I wish I could just like tweak it just a little bit just to make it so I could play in the 2 hours I have between getting home from work and having to make a microwave meal and jerk off and all that stuff. So there's sort of three different conversations that aren't necessarily connected in terms of, how you'd argue any one of them, but you kind of can't argue one without thinking about the other ones. So first of all, I'm just going to argue them all separately. All right, accessibility, first of all. This one's a real soft lob, folks. Games for the longest time were not made for a lot of people. There are a lot of people out there who either have physical issues, movement issues that don't allow them to play games the way you and I play them, or they have problems with hearing or sight. There's like a massive amount of different ways in which folks might have a problem interfacing with a piece of software or a piece of hardware. I studied human-computer interfaces for a while when I was in college. It was a real big part of it, but I didn't really think about it in terms of games until I started seeing the work of people like Able Gamers, who of course we had Stephen Spawn on our podcast a couple of months back, really bringing it to the forefront of players' minds and also developers' minds. And what's been great is that over the past couple of years, games have done a lot to sort of make them more accessible. There's still a lot more work to be done, but I think, we're all in agreement, right? Games should be more accessible, right? Okay, now the one in the middle. This one's a bit harder. The sort of idea that games should be tweakable, that we should be able to cater them to our exact specifications so that it's not too hard, it's not too easy. And I hate to break it to everyone, but that's all fucking games. Difficulty is kind of completely arbitrary. I remember talking to Jonathan Blow when we did our Witness documentary, and he was talking about how there's no ceiling to how tough games can be. You just make enemies' bullets do 1 million damage and make them 1 million health, and it's a harder game. What's interesting in games design is challenge and players being able to get better at something and then, overcome what they previously were not able to overcome. And some games do it through, upgrading your character and the numbers just get higher and you get better that way. And then other games, like the Soulsborne games, are we saying Sekiro Born or something? I don't know. Those games do it by teaching you how to play the game, by being pretty brutal about it, and eventually sort of, through onboarding you a little bit and player ramping, and also just like you having to look up wikis, you get really good at these games, and it's a fun time. And it's one of the most satisfying experiences in the world. My experience with Bloodborne's one of the best games I've ever played. I have the Hunter's Mark tattooed on my arm. I fucking love that game. It's the best. But as a concept, it's difficulty and challenge and feeling good is it's a dance between the developer and the player. And it sounds like early impressions, at least for some players, is that Sekiro is a lot more challenging than previous From Software games they might have played. So right now, that dance doesn't feel as fun. So I get where people are coming from. I get where people are coming from, where it's like, oh, I wish I could just like tweak the things a little bit here and there. One example of that, which rings true with me, is racing games. So I love Formula One. I have a Formula One podcast. Go to f1.cool, shift F1 podcast. And when I play F1 video games, I tend to play with a wheel and with pedals, and I tend to play with a lot of the assists turned off. When I worked at GameSpot, we had a racing wheel set up in the office, and I had F1, I think it was 2017 then, set up with my wheel and my chassis and everything, and all the assists were off. And I go over, at lunch breaks and do a couple of laps. And if any of the rest of the crew, who were like all good at other driving games, would sit down, they wouldn't be able to get off the grid. The wheels would spin too fast when the lights went out, and they'd spin, and they'd struggle to just go in a straight line. Like, those games can be incredibly difficult if you turn off all the assists. Now, my version of playing the game is fundamentally different to the way most people play racing games, with a controller, accelerator, and brake. But that doesn't mean that my experience is any better or worse than people who are just playing on a controller, because you can do that with the F1 games as well. They're just two different ways of playing the game. And I imagine somebody who is playing on a pad can probably garner a similar amount of enjoyment from the game as I do in my experience of playing with a wheel and pedals. So different strokes for different folks, right? And when you look at the way Soulsborne games have been designed in the past, they've given you these outs. They exist, right? The easiest one I can think of is Father Gascoigne in Bloodborne and the music box. By that stage, the designers knew that people were playing these games on wikis, right? And they knew that eventually, if somebody was having a bit of trouble, their buddy would tell them, or they'd Google it, that, you know what, this boss, it's pretty difficult, but if you use this music box, he'll go, "Argh!" and then you can like wail on him for a bit, and it helps you out quite a bit. So I mention that only to say that there is precedent in Soulsborne games for them doing this sort of stuff to allow certain players to ease off the difficulty a little bit if they so wish. And that brings us on to the third point, which is, creative intent and the ideas of auteurs and how we should let creative people make the creative, things of their dreams, and we shouldn't stand in their way by putting arbitrary social rules in front of them and stuff. And like, on the face of it, as like somebody who, makes stuff sometimes, I like that. I like that. That's a sexy concept to me. Some of my favorite film directors are people like that. Werner Herzog, for instance, is a favorite of mine. And one of the things I like about his work is that it is purely his. Like, you were experiencing this film through his vision. And if you've watched his older work and you watch a new piece of work, you can take that into it in the same way you do with an author or a painter or something like that. First of all, when it comes to video games, I'd say that the idea of, an individual's creative intent is kind of bullshitty. When Jackson Pollock paints a painting, the distance between him and his work is just the distance between his arm flailing through the air and the canvas in front of him. With Werner Herzog, for instance, the difference between him and his creation is maybe the DOP who's holding the camera, but he's always there, right? And then the editor helping him in post-production piece the whole thing together. But he's pretty connected to every piece of it, and by the end you're watching a Herzogian piece of art. Games, on the other hand, involve far, far more collaborators. Even indie teams usually have, a half dozen or a dozen people working on them. In the case of the Souls games, I'm imagining it's a couple of hundred. Obviously, Miyazaki is the sort of creative director of these projects, so he has a vision for the project, as I'm sure a lot of the different departmental leads have a vision as well. But what I've learned from interviewing developers is that sometimes you might get an American McGee situation maybe, where you've got one person really leading the charge for this is what I want to make. But more often than not, especially in established studios where people have been working really well and working, getting better and getting more experience, you have a lot of people who are really, really good at what they do. And the work tends to be more of a creative soup. In terms of the broader direction with the top level of the studio, and then in terms of the sort of like micro feel of aspects like, how the game looks or sounds, or specific pieces of content or writing in the game, in the sort of, the rest of the workforce at the studio. So while I agree with the idea that creative people should make creative things and, we shouldn't expect everyone to apply, every desire of every consumer to the piece of art that they create, I think that it definitely is diluted when it comes to games specifically. So those are sort of the three things we have here, okay? We have the accessibility conversation over here, we have the artistic intent conversation over here, and in the middle we have, man, Sekiro is hard. I wish I could just like respawn forever or something here in the middle. And this is the problem I've had, which has made me stop editing for, 10 minutes to shout at my camera like this. It's because these three conversations keep happening on their own, but you can't talk about one without talking about the others. Creative intent is important. Does that mean we should make it so that lots of people can't play video games? Probably not, right? Middle part, yes, it would be good if there were more options in the game. Maybe more people would be able to play this game. Would it dilute the creative intent of the game? Maybe in some ways. I mean, it's called Shadows Die Twice. If we made it so you respawned over and over again, they'd have to rename the game. And there's probably some sort of I haven't completed it yet. There's probably some story reason why you only come back to life once, right? And the reason we're having these siloed conversations is because that's how the fucking internet works. To get this across, I've had to talk to the camera for 700 seconds or something, because this is a complex issue. And there was a time when we were talking about games that things were relatively simple. I'd open up my Games Master magazine when I was a teenager, and it was got cheat codes and whether or not the game was good and the graphics were okay and all that jazz. Maybe, is that joystick worth 50 quid? They never were, they always fucking broke. Stuff like that. Just very basic sort of conversations about the world of video games. And we're now in a world, and I'm talking to somebody who interviews developers about their work and struggles to get these documentaries down under an hour. We're now in a world where the conversation about games isn't that simple anymore. So the old tools we have, and some of the new tools, like social media, they just don't really work when it comes to having these conversations. A Twitter post is like 280 characters. There's no way I could cram this video down into that. And a journalist writes an article about what they think about it, and then they give it a headline, which is just definitely going to piss everyone off. But you need a headline, because we can't expect people to just go read a big piece of text. We need to get them through the door first. And that's the way the internet works. That's the way our media, that's the way our brains work. So my point in all of this is that there is no one answer to this, that these are complex issues, that different people will have different perspectives depending on what's important to them on the matter. And that when we talk about these things, we're sort of getting insight into the creative decisions that need to be made by game studios while they're making the games. Everything we've talked about, I'm sure, has come up in discussions at From Software. They know that their games are hard, and they've been trying to change it for years. Miyazaki has said as much in the past. Sekiro is far easier to understand than Bloodborne and Dark Souls. There's no fucking bone marrow ash. There's no blood vials. There's none of that obfuscation anymore. All this inventory and uses of items, it's all pretty obvious, and if it's not, it's written in plain English right there. The player onboarding has been designed to make it easier than ever to get into the game. They even have a dummy that you can go and fight and practice in the corner of your hub area. So they're aware of these things too. I know firsthand that this helped a bunch of people who had stumbled playing From Software games in the past actually learn how to play this one. But did this hand-holding make the world of Sekiro less mysterious than those of, say, Dark Souls and Bloodborne? I imagine, yeah, it probably did. Perhaps that matters to you a lot. But to others, being able to play the game matters so much more. We all experience games differently and value things differently, and understanding that is key to understanding why we love games. But more than anything else, I think this is a really fantastic opportunity for most of us to look at the different ways in which people play games, and not to dismiss them right away as people, just being bad at games or being elitist about difficulty or talking about accessibility, but that doesn't really affect me. This is a really good example where loads of different types of people are enjoying this game or want to enjoy this game, and they're advocating for something that is important to them about this game, that it is hard, that it is accessible, whatever it is. It's a really good opportunity to just sit back for a second, you know, chill the fuck out, don't react right away, and listen to other people about the ways in which they play games. Because that's what game design is. It's creating games that different people are able to play and are able to experience the game and enjoy the game on their own terms.